person who writes the blog Sagittarius Dolly, whose URL you can see below right now. I'm here to show you one of the few artifacts from my childhood that didn't fall victim to one of my mother's periodic purges that she did as I was growing up. And here it is, and this is a vintage postcard set from a now defunct amusement park that was my favorite place when I was growing up. When you unfold the flap, like right here, you get an accordion-like fold-out. This postcard set featured pictures from this amusement park when it was in its prime. The amusement park was called the Enchanted Forest, and it was located in Ellicott City, Maryland. The Enchanted Forest was a fairy tale and nursery rhyme theme park, and it was one of hundreds that sprouted all over the United States in the wake of Walt Disney's announcement that he planned on building Disneyland in California. Suddenly, a whole bunch of entrepreneurs decided to take advantage of that announcement by coming up with their own amusement parks, featuring characters from fairy tales and nursery rhymes. These entrepreneurs figured that their own amusement park would be of interest to families who couldn't afford to travel to visit Disneyland in California. Among those entrepreneurs were a pair of Baltimore-based businessmen, Howard Harrison Sr. and his son, Howard Harrison Jr., who, together with their family, founded the Enchanted Forest. The Enchanted Forest officially opened on August 15, 1955, 1 month after Disneyland opened in California, and it initially did a tremendous business, especially among families too cash-strapped to travel cross-country to Disneyland. My family were among the cash-strapped ones who took me to the Enchanted Forest once a year for many years in a row. As a child walking through that place, I felt awed at the sight of seeing all these characters from my favorite stories and nursery rhymes come to life. I didn't care that the real-life characters were basically non-moving fiberglass statues. It was just the sight of them was thrilling enough for me. Then there were the homes and other buildings where we could look through windows and doors and see all kinds of fantasy scenes. All of the windows and door openings were short enough for a small child to peek in and see what went on inside. There were a few rides, but none of them were scary at all. To my young mind, the Enchanted Forest was the most magical place on earth. But then I hit around 9 or 10 years old, and there was one year when I went, and the place just didn't interest me at all. I was growing up, and I began to realize that the fairy tale characters were all just statues, and even the few rides that the park had were way too slow and tame for me. I began to think that the Enchanted Forest was lame. After that, I stopped going to the Enchanted Forest. The Enchanted Forest continued to do a decent business until the 1970s, when it started getting local competition from other theme parks. Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania began extensive renovations in 1970, which not only attracted families with small children, but it also had rides and shows which were geared to older children, teens, and adults. In 1975, King's Dominion opened near Richmond, Virginia, and it had rides and attractions geared towards all ages. 1975 was also the year that Busch Gardens opened in Williamsburg, Virginia, and it also had rides and attractions geared towards all ages. Even I began to prefer these other theme parks to the Enchanted Forest as I grew older. Here's a photo button of me at 16 that was made at King's Dominion. Here's another button from Hershey Park bragging about how I survived getting on a Super Duper Looper roller coaster. And here's a button from Busch Gardens Williamsburg that brags about how I survived riding the Loch Ness Monster roller coaster. The Enchanted Forest lost so much business that the Harrison family ultimately sold the park to JHP Development in 1988, and the park was closed the following year. The new owners turned what was the parking lot into a shopping center in 1992. In 1994, the owners reopened the theme park predominantly for children's birthday parties, only to decide to permanently close the park in 1995. In 1997, the park was purchased by Mid-Atlantic Realty, and the company itself was purchased by Kimco Realty, Incorporated, in 2003. For many years, the old attractions began to just sit there, being exposed to the elements year-round, with no maintenance work being done on them at all. For a while, it seemed like the Enchanted Forest was destined to fade away, to be remembered only by people of a certain age who had childhood memories similar to mine. There were a few attempts to purchase the land behind the shopping center so the Enchanted Forest could be reopened by a few organizations consisting of average citizens, but all those efforts ultimately failed. The Enchanted Forest rescue was finally in the public radar when the original pumpkin coach from the Cinderella ride was auctioned off for charity. The people who won that auction had a hard time figuring out what to do with it until a local farm located just a few miles from the former theme park came forward with an idea. Martha Ann Clark, whose family operates Clark's Elioak farm, had the farm purchase the pumpkin coach and relocated there right next to the petting zoo that it had opened to the general public a few years earlier. That pumpkin coach became such a hit with the general public that Martha Ann Clark decided to approach Kimco Realty, which currently owns the Enchanted Forest Shopping Center, about obtaining some of the other artifacts from the old theme park. Kimco said that they would give everything located in the fenced-off area behind the shopping center to Martha Ann Clark for free on one condition. She had to make all the arrangements for relocating the old attractions to the farm. With the effort of various farm employees and numerous volunteers, the attractions were not only relocated to the farm, but they were also restored to their original condition. Eventually, Cinderella's coach was reunited with the mice who once drew that coach to and from Cinderella's castle, and was also reunited with Cinderella and Prince Charming as well. Today, Cinderella's coach ride is now a stationary attraction at Clark's Elioak farm, while the mice from that ride have been converted to park benches. As for myself, I didn't think about the Enchanted Forest for a number of years until I saw an article in the Washington Post about this farm that had taken a lot of the old attractions from that theme park and has given it new life. I decided to check it out for myself to see what it was like. I also compared it to that vintage souvenir postcard set to see how well all of the original attractions were restored. I have to mention that one of the cards in the vintage postcard set shows a map and directions to the original theme park. If you follow those same directions today, you'll see Old King Cole still pointing the way to the Enchanted Forest Shopping Center. That shopping center is a typical American suburban shopping center which has a Safeway and a few chain stores like Petco. There's a bank and a few restaurants as well. A couple of the stores incorporate the name Enchanted Forest. The Enchanted Forest Shopping Center is a typical shopping center that's more notable than average only because of the fact that it has a few vestiges of its theme park past that remained when I shot this video in October 2014. There's Old King Cole. There's the original castle entrance with the lute-playing dragon, whose entrance is now permanently shut. There's also the storybook sign next to the castle. All the other attractions are at Clark's Elioak Farm, located just a few miles away. The entrance to Clark's Elioak Farm is a recreation of the original castle entrance. The lute-playing dragon is a replica of the original, but Rapunzel herself came from the original castle. When you go inside, there's a little store that sells snacks, drinks, toys, books, and other souvenirs just like the original castle entrance at the Enchanted Forest. You walk out back onto a farm. In many ways, Clark's Elioak Farm is a typical working farm, with a little something extra. There is a pumpkin patch. There are goats, sheep, cows, and pigs for the general public to feed and pet. And of course, there are the original Enchanted Forest theme park attractions. Here are a few more pictures from my vintage postcard souvenir set. This postcard photo is of the home of the three bears that is based on the famous story Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Here is the Three Bears' home that's now located on Clark's Elioak Farm. It is just as I remembered it from my childhood. There's Papa Bear smoking his pipe. There's Baby Bear looking out the window while Goldilocks looks frightened that she's been caught sleeping in Baby Bear's bed. And there is another view of the house. And here's Papa Bear, who's sitting outside. Here is a postcard photo of the home that Snow White shared with the 7 dwarfs. The 7 dwarfs are now dispersed among this mobile mining experience where people of all ages can take a crack at finding gemstones. Here is Snow White in the 7 dwarfs' bedroom that is now located inside of a large shed at the farm. Snow White shares space in that shed with Sleeping Beauty next door, as the 3 fairies watch over her and the prince is ready to kiss her awake. This photo shows the Mother Goose ride driving past the Robin Hood snack bar. Sadly, the Robin Hood snack bar was burned to the ground in the early 1990s by a few teenage vandals who broke into the park after it closed down for good. Today, if you were to go to the back of the shed where Snow White and Sleeping Beauty live side by side, you'll see Robin Hood still swashbuckling with an enemy, while one of the card guards from the Alice in Wonderland ride stands off to the side. As for Mother Goose and her friends, they are at Clark's Elioak farm, but they are now stationary and can no longer give rides to anyone. Mother Goose now sits next to the Easter Bunny's house, which was another rescued Enchanted Forest attraction. As for her friends, the Swan and the Ugly Duckling, they are located in a separate area of the farm. This postcard shows the Crooked Man's house in the foreground and 2 other attractions in the background. Here is what the Crooked Man's house looked like then, and here is what the Crooked Man's house looks like now at its current location. In the background to the left of the Crooked Man's house in the postcard is Jack and the Beanstalk. Here is Jack and the Beanstalk today. Jack is still carrying the goose that laid the golden egg as he's being pursued by the giant down the beanstalk. In the background on the far right of that postcard that's off in the distance is Humpty Dumpty, sitting on a wall. Here is Humpty Dumpty today, and he's still sitting on a wall. This postcard shows a Little Toot boat ride after it exited through Mount Vesuvius, which was a big sliding board. The original Mount Vesuvius was too big to transport to Clark's Elioak farm, so the fine people at the farm did the next best thing. They created a smaller version of Mount Vesuvius that's now a sliding board, just like the original. As for Little Toot, he's at Clark's Elioak farm as well. He now sits in a large pond that's a far cry from when he used to give boat rides in a large man-made lake. He can no longer give boat rides, and he's been converted into a stationary attraction. Anyone can still board Little Toot and sit on his benches by walking a short wooden plank. Little Toot shares this big pond with a few other Enchanted Forest attractions. One is Willy the Whale. Anyone can sit in Willy the Whale's mouth. If you look down his throat, you'll see Jonah, who has just been swallowed by Willy the Whale. Another attraction that's in the same pond is the 3 men from the nursery rhyme, Rub-a-Dub-Dub. Little Toot, Willy the Whale, and the Rub-a-Dub-Dub men also share this large pond with one other attraction that has its own separate photo in my vintage postcard set. This photo shows the Mary Miller's house. The wheel used to actually spin as it picked up water. Here is the Mary Miller's house at Clark's Elioak farm today. It is located in the same large pond as Little Toot, Willy the Whale, and the Rub-a-Dub-Dub men. You can see the Mary Miller inside as he sings his own theme song. This postcard shows a gingerbread house in its prime. This structure was based on the one in Hansel and Gretel. It was also a place where children's birthday parties were held. I used to look in the windows at the various birthday parties that were held there. I always wanted a birthday party in the gingerbread house, but that was one childhood wish that went unfulfilled because the Enchanted Forest was only open from Easter weekend until late October, and my birthday is in December, when the theme park was closed for the season. I last saw the original gingerbread house from a distance in October 2014 while I was visiting the Enchanted Forest Shopping Center. I looked around the roped off area to see if I could see anything from a distance, and I found it in the woods. The gingerbread house looked like it had a collapsed roof, but the ice cream cone chimney still looked like it was in excellent shape. The gingerbread house was deemed too big to transfer to Clark's Elioak farm, but some of the original items from there made the trip. There is a large birthday cake that was once the centerpiece of the gingerbread house. There are some gingerbread men, and they are guarding a newer gingerbread house that's now much smaller than the original. Hansel and Gretel are on the rooftop. Inside, one can see the witch being jailed, along with some of the swirls on the ceiling that resemble some vintage photos of inside of the gingerbread house that I've seen online. Clark's Elioak farm does hold birthday parties, but they are located in a different area other than the small gingerbread house. This vintage postcard photo shows the home of Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother, along with Little Red Riding Hood being portrayed by one of the Enchanted Forest employees. Here is the home of Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother today. The home is smaller than the original structure, but if you look inside, you'll see Little Red Riding Hood looking suspiciously at the so-called grandmother, who's really a wolf in disguise. This vintage postcard shows a structure that's based on a nursery rhyme, "There was an old woman who lived in a shoe." Basically, you enter this giant shoe through a door on the side, then you slide down a sliding board through the bottom of that shoe. I used to love going on that sliding board as a child. Here is the same structure today on Clark's Elioak farm. There are still children climbing outside of the giant shoe structure, and children can still slide down the sliding board through the sole of that shoe. This vintage postcard shows the Alice in Wonderland ride, where a large teapot pulls a set of interconnected teacups. Parts of the ride are now on Clark's Elioak farm, but they are permanently stationary. The teacups can be found throughout the grounds of the farm, and they are now used as benches for people to sit on. This vintage postcard set mentions two other Enchanted Forest attractions that didn't make the transition to Clark's Elioak farm. One is the antique car ride. I used to love getting in those antique cars because they were sized small enough for a young child. The other one that didn't make it to Clark's Elioak farm is an area of the park known as Jungle Land. Basically, you got in a safari train that's pulled by a jeep as it drove past African villages, animatronic animals that looked like they were swimming in a lake, and African natives that looked like they were waving to people. But then there were Enchanted Forest attractions on Clark's Elioak farm that weren't mentioned in my vintage souvenir postcard set, like the dish and a spoon from the nursery rhyme Hey Diddle Diddle, the bridge that had the Jack Be Nimble nursery rhyme printed on the side, the clock from the nursery rhyme Hickory Dickory Dock, Little Boy Blue, Mary, Mary, quite contrary, the spider from Little Miss Muffet, who's now next to the rainbow sliding board, the tortoise and the hare, a donkey living under a giant sombrero, a teepee and a covered wagon from the American Old West, Peter, Peter, Pumpkin Eater, the three little pigs, including the pig with his home made of straw, the pig with his home made of sticks, and the pig with his home made of bricks, and the big bad wolf trying to huff, puff, and blow everything down. There were a few touches at Clark's Elioak farm that had never been at the Enchanted Forest before, such as the trees with faces on them, and a family of triceratops that I saw for the first time when I visited Clark's Elioak farm in October 2014. At the time I filmed this footage, I thought that I had said everything that needed to be said about the Enchanted Forest, the Enchanted Forest Shopping Center, and Clark's Elioak farm. But then I read online in early 2015 that Kimco Realty, who owns the Enchanted Forest Shopping Center, wanted the last few remaining theme park attractions to be moved, or else it was going to tear them down. The main reason is that for many years, Kimco had to deal with people sneaking into the former park in the back of the shopping center. Sometimes these trespassers committed vandalism. Sometimes these trespassers recorded themselves in the act of trespassing, such as this footage that was posted on Adam DeWoo's YouTube channel. Basically, Kimco grew tired of dealing with trespassers. So some of the last attractions that can be relocated were shipped to Clark's Elioak farm just in time for a celebration of the 60th anniversary of the day that the original Enchanted Forest opened its door to the general public for the first time. This celebration was held on August 15th, 2015. When I arrived that hot and humid August day, I saw 2 sets of castle turrets in the horizon. It was a big celebration as local craft vendors sold their wares under canopies. The original castle with the lute-playing dragon that once graced the entry to the Enchanted Forest and the storybook sign are now located at Clark's Elioak farm. It came time for the rededication ceremony as the ribbon of the entryway of the original castle was cut and a cloaked figure in one of the castle turrets was unveiled.
Now this worked 3 times in a row yesterday, so I'm praying it works today. Come on.
It's a replica of Old King Cole. Another cloaked figure was also unveiled. It was a sign announcing the coming of the dinosaurs to Clark's Elioak farm, who would join the Triceratops family starting the following month. A birthday cake was served to the general public. There was a special exhibit showing press clippings, photographs, and other artifacts from the original Enchanted Forest. There was an art show featuring works based on the various Enchanted Forest attractions, and they were all available for sale that day. Old King Cole with his pointing finger is the sole vestige of the Enchanted Forest Shopping Center's theme park past. I made one more trip to that same part of Ellicott City in 2015, just 2 months after that 60th anniversary celebration. I also made a return trip to Clark's Elioak farm, just so I can check out the dinosaurs, which are now mingled among the original Enchanted Forest attractions. And there's even a scientist type who's now standing next to the Hickory Dickory Dock clock. Okay, so dinosaurs weren't part of the original Enchanted Forest, but so what? The Enchanted Forest attractions aren't meant to be enshrined like a museum. Clark's Elioak farm is just taking a playbook from Disney and other theme parks where, if you want repeat business, you have to add new attractions from time to time. Ultimately, this movie is about how attractions from a once popular theme park from my childhood found a new life on a farm that is simply not just going to rest on its laurels, but instead will continue to add to the old attractions, which will create new memories for newer generations of children. There are other now defunct theme parks scattered throughout the United States that are currently rotting, just like the attractions in the old Enchanted Forest once did. Can what happened be replicated elsewhere? I believe so. As the old saying goes, when there's a will, there's a way. All you need is enough people to share the same vision and have the resources to make it happen.